Tom, thank you very much for taking some time to talk with me. For the folks that don't know who you are or your law firm or your specialty, could you take a minute just to let people know about your background and your experience?
Sure, Raj. Appreciate the chance to be together this afternoon. Uh, I've been practicing since 1981. So my background includes being a former assistant state attorney. I have been a board certified civil trial lawyer, shifted into estate planning. And over time, I basically have developed what I call a concierge law practice. So that's where my clients have my cell number and we, work together regardless of what their issues are. They come in, we sit down. I do a legal triage, basically to find out what's going on, and then walk with them through the process of taking care of that.
So, Tom, when we first met, what I was so impressed on within a few minutes of you speaking is not only the depth of knowledge you have in what I've now come to learn as Constitution, the way our country's governed, how the Constitution governs our country. But I also was so impressed with your ability to explain it in a way such as myself, I'm a bean counter, could understand. And I'm particularly excited to talk with you today because, as you know, the Electoral College the vote has been cast. And for those of us who feel that that vote did not in any way reflect the widespread corruption and the widespread irregularities of the voting process, could you explain to us what does this mean? The Electoral College vote's been cast. Does this mean that this is a done deal? Could you help us understand what happens between now and the next president being sworn in?
Sure. Well, where we are right now, we're in the run-up to the date where both houses of Congress, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, will meet together. And that is the process where they then begin to open up these electors' certificates that were sent in from each of the states. Some states have actually had two sets of electors sent to Washington.
Why would there be two sets? I haven't heard about this two sets in any of the CNN or Fox
really?
Or ABC. I haven't heard anything about two sets. What do you mean by two sets?
Yeah. Well, in the states where they have had just palpable, right out in the open fraud, and yet nothing has been conclusively established in terms of recalling the electors or whatever, states can send two slates. So there are states that have set up a slate of electors for Donald J. Trump and Michael Pence, in addition to the others. And that's important to know because that's where there can actually be a contest at the time that Congress meets to go over the electoral votes that have been sent to them.
This is very important for me to understand, Tom. So what I hear you saying is this process, unlike what I've seen on CNN and their competitors, this does not seem to be a done deal if you look at it from the standpoint of where we are in a constitutional process for our government. This is still not a done deal, is what I think I hear you saying. Is that correct?
Exactly. And there's some pundits that believe that really the purpose for all of these cases has been to establish all of the evidence that exists. That in the hearings before different committees in different states, where on the record, there's been testimony from witness after witness, the sworn affidavits, that is witnesses to the fraud in various forms and fashion, where they've signed under the penalty of perjury. And so what's amazing, and I won't spend a lot of time on it because anybody who turns on Main Street media is, the complete fabrication that there's no evidence. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming.
So I want to just pause you for just a second there. So folks, if you're just watching this, we're talking to Tom Whitaker. Tom is not a newspaper reporter. Tom is not a news anchor. Tom is not a news personality. What Tom is, however, is he's an attorney. So I feel that he probably has a better handle on what constitutes evidence than the folks on Fox News, ABC, and all those guys. So you say, Tom, that what we've seen so far is actual evidence. Did I hear you correctly there?
Oh, it's mountainous. And we could, if we had more time, go over the different states, because there's different scenarios, like in Georgia, where they have the mail-in ballot that was changed for those who mail it in versus those who walk it in, absentee ballots, no signature verification. The Constitution doesn't allow for that, the state Constitution. I mean, you go to YouTube, you can actually see in Nevada where the electors for Trump and Pence, they stated what they had discovered in their investigation. And so, they signed their certificates right there on camera.
So what I think I hear you saying is, even though it seems like all of this evidence, the video showing in Georgia where the officials are running the same ballot through the machine multiple times and pulling out ballots from under the table after all the observers have gone, I was beginning to feel, Tom, that all that evidence didn't do anything because it was ignored, and the Electoral College voted, it seems, without considering any of that. But you keep bringing this up, Tom. So are you saying, Tom, that there's still an opportunity between now and the time the president is sworn in, whether it be in the hearing, for this evidence to be re-examined in a way that might make a difference, Tom?
Yeah, and so if we go to the 3 U.S. Code, Chapter 1, that's the section that deals with presidential elections and vacancies. And you go to Section 15, it deals specifically with the procedure that's followed, counting electoral votes in Congress. So, that's spelled out right there is what can happen, or the different paths that they can take. It comes down to whether if a state only sends in one certified slate of electors, well, that's the slate. But if a state has sent in 2 slates of electors, and if an objection is filed that is signed by at least 1 member of the House of Representatives and 1 member of the U.S. Senate, then the Senate convenes in a separate session, the House convenes in a separate session, and that's where evidence can be produced to support the objection.
This is really remarkable. This is really remarkable, Tom, because what I think I just heard is all of this evidence that we've seen, and it just seems to be so obvious, but all this evidence has an opportunity to be examined in a governmental forum, but it only will happen if a member of the Senate and a member of the House of Representatives files or makes a request to do that. And I can just imagine, I'm just going to use, I live in Florida, as do you. I'm Rick Scott. I can just imagine what kind of pressure that guy's on. Anyone who doesn't think that there are people pressuring Rick Scott to just be quiet, be a good boy, don't make a fuss, just let this go as it is without creating any ruckus. I can just imagine the pressure this guy's on. So if I heard you correctly, that any member of the Senate or the House could file an objection, and that action triggers this separate special session where the evidence can be.
It's not a special session. I mean, it's literally at that time, the Senate, I believe that, like the State of the Union, they're all going to be meeting in the House chambers, their meeting area. So they're going to withdraw and go back to the Senate chambers. And that's where and the meeting is going to be monitored and supervised by Vice President Pence, because he's the vice president. Okay. And so that's where the determination is going to be made, whether they're going to sustain the objection or overrule it. And if they acknowledge that the voter or the electors that were submitted for President Trump and Mike Pence, then that'll be reported back to the joint session. Same thing going on in the House. That'll be reported back in the joint session. And so it would have to be a concurrent. They both would have to find that there was illegality and fraudulent conduct, because only legal votes are to be considered. So that's the pathway at that point. And I believe, and I was looking for it quickly, but I saw something where there's rules in place where each member gets 5 minutes to present, their argument and their evidence, and the total thing can only last 2 hours. So it's not like it's going to be a real drawn out major scenario, but there's ways to put on evidence in a condensed fashion. And I said, anybody who's paid any attention to what's been going on, it is incredible, the mischief that's been afoot.
So it seems then that our senators and the members of the Congress, we the people, have got to urge them or compel them to file this objection, because that's a trigger point for this. If they don't file, if everyone just sits back and doesn't want to rock the boat but go with the flow, then this is a done deal. But if they were to file that objection, that's the pivot that actually starts this in a way that the evidence can be reexamined. Did I understand that correctly, Tom?
Yeah, and if you go back and look at the Supreme Court case Bush versus Gore, if you remember what happened with the hanging chads, and basically the objection was not recognized because no U.S. senator would sign on to the objection that was placed. There had been an order to stop the recount by the Florida Supreme Court, and they were trying to say, no, you've got to continue it. And when it reached the joint session to consider the electors that have been submitted, and that by law is the 6th day of January. And so, and it's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So, I mean, they've got specific rules, when they're going to be meeting. But that's what happened in the Bush-Gore U.S. Supreme Court case.
So you just heard it there. There's a precedent for this. This is not something that has to be invented. This has been part of how our government has been structured. There's a provision, but here's a big but. You just heard it from Tom. When it happened with Gore versus Bush, or Bush versus Gore, there wasn't someone who would stand up and second the motion. Here, January 6th, is it 6th or 5th?
6th.
January 6th, 2021, you watching this video, you have got to urge and compel your elected officials to raise the objection, to second the motion, to have this stuff be examined. If you do that, we can pull this off. If we don't, we won't. So in a very, very real way, this has come down to we the people. Are we the people going to rise up and have our elected officials do what we want them to do or not? So Tom, thanks for helping me understand that. So let me just fast forward that just so we can complete that loop. So January 6th is the next big pivotal event. There's an opportunity here for we the people to stand up and cause something to happen. If there's deadlock there, what happens if that doesn't get resolved? What's the next fallback?
We need to look at both the 12th and the 20th Amendments, and that would perhaps be worthy of separate discussion. But ultimately, if there's not a majority of certified electors that are recognized by Congress, ultimately, then it's decided by a vote of the two separate houses. So in other words, the president will be decided by a vote in the House, but each state will only have one vote. So that means all of the representatives from that state, all the members of Congress, of the House of Representatives, have to get together and then they come up with one vote. So the House elects the president, the Senate elects the vice president.
Remarkable, remarkable. So look, this is mind-blowing for me, because guys, this is not in the hands of CNN. This is not in the hands of Fox or ABC or NBC. It's not even in the hands of Zuckerberg, Facebook, or Google, or YouTube. This is literally in our hands, you and me. We have got an opportunity here to rise up and compel our elected officials to do our bidding on January 6th. Failing that, we've got another opportunity where we've got to compel our elected officials, you just heard it right there, to cast the vote in the way we want them to cast. But it's only going to happen if our presence is felt and our wishes are honored. And that comes to you and me. It's not Trump, it's not Supreme Court, it is you and me. So I met Tom just recently, actually, at a meeting. And the reason I'm bringing that up is when I met Tom, this was a group of folks in Bradenton that have gotten together because they want to take action. If you're watching this video and the only thing you're relying on is your computer, you're in a vulnerable place. What I mean by that is you need to connect with other like-minded people where you are. You need to form a group. Josh Sapienza is in Cape Coral. He's 21 years old. He's never done anything politically. He saw a need. He formed a group, and he is an example of an American young man who is making difference by leading other people to take action in favor of the values he has. I want to urge you to follow Josh's example and do the same thing. Tom, this is so great. We've got so much more in this interview. I can tell that we've got to do a bunch more interviews to unpack the rest of it. But I want to take the opportunity to have someone who knows what they're talking about, not a news anchor, not a news reporter, to explain what the process is. And you did that so beautifully for us. Tom, I want to give you the last word. What do you want someone who's watching this video, who's thinking, man, I really am dismayed by what's happening, but I don't really know what I can do. I think it might be too late. I'm a little discouraged. If someone like that is watching this video, Tom, what would you want them to hear from you?
Well, again, I don't know who your audience is, but for those who, have Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, and so that's would put them in the category, particularly if they're watching this, of being a spirit-empowered patriot. What I would urge them to do is be sure they're in prayer. We need to be praying, lifting up this country, lifting up the leaders, and that right now would be in the state legislatures, but it's mainly going to be the members of the House and the members of the Senate in Congress, that they literally are going to feel the weight of the responsibility they have, because they all raised their right hand and swore to protect and defend the United States Constitution, so help me God. And so they need to understand that oath is not only they're held accountable by the voters, but if they plan on continuing their career in politics, they might be mindful of the fact that the Lord puts people in power and the Lord takes people out of power. The other thing is engage in conversation with your circle of influence. Chuck Colson, remember him from the Watergate years?
Yeah.
He accepted the Lord while in federal prison, and he started an incredible, very fruitful prison ministry. And that's how he served out the rest of his life. His last public interview or statement, he was making a little presentation. I happened to catch it. He said, the way we're going to take back our country is not going to be in Washington, but it's going to be by folks having conversations over the backyard fence and at barbecues. So we need to be having these, people say, don't talk about politics and religion. Well, that is completely bogus. If the first generation spirit-empowered patriots didn't talk about politics, we would have helped host the last Olympics as a branch of the United Kingdom. And if the first generation disciples didn't share the gospel, Christianity would have made it out of the beginning of the church in 50 AD or whatever. Anyway, I got a little more I could say, but I think that's enough for now, because take this information, read it yourselves, go back and look at the 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The 20th Amendment changed the dates of when terms start. Go to the U.S. Code. You can just put it into Google. It's 3 U.S. Code, Section 15. And educate those around you, educate to motivate. And so that's where we are. It's a republic if we can keep it.
And Tom,
and one nation under God.
Say that part again. I spoke over you. I apologize.
Yeah, if you remember Ben Franklin when he left the Constitutional Congress, the convention, A lady is supposedly, historically, she asked him, Mr. Franklin, what kind of government did you give us? And he said, a constitutional republic, if you can keep it. And so the prayer is important because that is step one in repenting of our, again, if you're a believer, I think you've got to be a good steward of liberty because God has provided that for us. We cannot take it for granted. But the Lord's still on the throne and the Constitution is still in force.
Tom, if someone wants to keep following you on Facebook or social media, what do they need to search so they can keep in touch with what you're doing?
Well, until Facebook takes us down, I've got a group, Spirit Empowered Patriots.
Empowered Patriots. Spirit Empowered Patriots. Search for that on Facebook. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for sharing this with us. Thanks very much.
I appreciate it. God bless. And Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to you as well.